January 20th, 1973. Boston. Late at night, and the wind is already past 70 miles per hour. When the building starts coming apart, it is still under construction. 60 stories of steel and reflective glass rising over Copley Square, the most historically protected neighborhood in the city, the most expensive building in New England, the tallest, the one designed by one of the most celebrated architectural firms in America. And on this particular night, with gusts hitting 75 miles per hour, its glass facade begins to shed. Entire panels detach from the frame. Each one is 4 feet wide, 11 feet tall, and 500 pounds. They drop from heights that reach nearly 800 feet, smashing into other panels on the way down, each impact triggering the next. A cascading chain reaction of glass falling onto the streets of Copley Square. By the time it stops, according to architectural record reporting from the period, the storm has directly broken 16 panels and fatally damaged 49 more. More than 1,000 panels crack in a single night. Police cordon off the surrounding blocks. The sidewalks are closed. Nobody is hurt. And nobody, not the architect, not the engineers, not the insurance company that commissioned the building, can yet explain why. The project was budgeted at $75 million. It would end up costing somewhere between $160 million and $175 million before it was finished. That doubling is not the most unsettling part of this story. The most unsettling part is that while the city was watching 500-pound glass panels fall from the sky, there was a second crisis happening inside the engineering files that the public would not hear about for years. This is the story of the John Hancock Tower, the building that was supposed to be a mirror and became a warning. Copley Square in the mid-1960s was one of the most architecturally consequential public spaces in America. H. Richardson's Trinity Church, completed in 1877, anchored one side. The Boston Public Library faced it from across the square. The Copley Plaza Hotel completed the frame. It was a city block that Boston had spent a century curating, and a city that had spent decades resisting tall buildings, particularly in Back Bay, where height limits and preservation instincts ran deep. Into this came the John Hancock Mutual Life Insurance Company, a Boston institution since the Civil War. Powerful, civic-minded, and by 1965, ready for a new headquarters. Not just a building, the building. According to documented accounts of the commission, there was an implicit understanding that whatever Hancock built would surpass the nearby Prudential Tower in height. 2 insurance companies, 2 neighboring towers, and an unspoken rivalry expressed in floors and glass. I.M. Pei and Partners was brought in. The project went to Henry N. Cobb, a founding partner of the firm and, crucially, a native Bostonian, a man who had grown up with Trinity Church in his sightline and understood what it meant to build beside it. Cobb designed the tower in a matter of weeks in the fall of 1967. The concept was disarming in its logic. Instead of imposing a massive modernist object on Copley Square, he would give the square a mirror, a 790-foot rhomboid prism wrapped entirely in blue-tinted reflective glass with no visible mullions, angled so its thinnest edge faced Trinity Church, a building that appeared to dissolve into the sky. One that would reflect Richardson's brownstone towers and the library's granite facade back at themselves, rather than competing with them. The building's silence, Cobb argued, was its argument. The design was unveiled on November 27, 1967. Boston's architectural community was divided. Many considered it wrong, morally, aesthetically, historically, to place a modernist glass tower on the sacred ground of Copley Square. Trinity Church grandees opposed it, but John Hancock was a major employer with significant civic weight, and the project was approved as designed. Groundbreaking began in August 1968. The scheduled completion was 1971. At 790 feet, the Hancock would be the tallest building in New England, beating the Prudential Tower by 40 feet. 60 stories of glass that would become, its supporters promised, the largest color field painting anyone had ever made. Always beautiful, always changing, always reflecting the city back at itself. The glass skin was the conceptual heart of the entire project. 10,344 panels of dual-pane insulating glass, each one 4 feet by 11 feet, each weighing 500 pounds. The system was technically novel at this scale. A reflective chromium layer between 2 panes of glass, with a sealed air gap in between, all bonded together with a lead solder system. The effect, seen from the street, was seamless. The building looked less like a constructed object and more like a vertical slice of atmosphere. What nobody had yet confirmed was how that bond would behave once the building was alive. All steel frame towers move. They flex in wind. They expand in heat and contract in cold. These are not failures. They are engineered expectations. The glass panels, too, were expected to move slightly. The sealed air cavity inside each panel would expand and contract with temperature changes. The bond between the layers was supposed to accommodate those movements, absorbing the stress so it never reached the glass itself. The bond did not absorb the stress. It transmitted it. The sealant was too stiff. When the building's steel frame flexed, tiny movements, fractions of an inch, the rigidity of the bond transferred those forces directly into the outer glass pane. When the sealed air expanded in summer heat or contracted in winter cold, the bond held too tight, pressing the stress into the glass rather than cushioning it. The building breathed, but the glass could not breathe with it. And glass under repeated, unrelieved stress eventually cracks. The cracks began at the connections between the panels and the frame. Invisible at first, building over months. By 1971, sporadic breakage was being reported even as construction continued. Some instances appeared to have explanations. Others did not. The problem was noted. The cause was not yet understood. Then came January 20th, 1973. The storm found every microscopic weakness simultaneously. The panels did not simply crack. They let go. And as each panel fell and struck the ones below, it created a chain reaction that the structure had no way to arrest. By April of that year, more than an acre of the building's glass face had been replaced with painted black plywood panels. The holes spread across the facade in irregular patches, each one marking a place where the design had failed. Boston gave it a name immediately: the Plywood Palace. The mockery was reported nationally. The most celebrated architectural project in New England looked like a condemned building undergoing emergency triage. Police continued closing the surrounding streets whenever wind speeds reached 45 miles per hour, a threshold that New England winters cross routinely. Workers, pedestrians, and the neighborhood adapted to the reality that the tower above them was not reliably attached to itself. MIT's Wright Brothers Wind Tunnel, under the direction of Frank H. Durgan, built a full-scale model of Back Bay and an aeroelastic model of the tower to investigate. The wind tunnel work revealed something that had not appeared in the original calculations. The building was experiencing unanticipated structural twisting. That finding raised its own alarm, but it could not explain the glass loss. The glass failure had a different cause, and it took an independent investigation to find it. Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager, an engineering firm brought in to analyze the fractures, conducted post-breakage analysis of the glass surfaces. Their conclusion confirmed what the manufacturer, Libby Owens Ford, had denied. The fracture was rooted in the design of the insulating glass units themselves, not the manufacturer's execution of a good design. The design. In June 1973, architect Henry Cobb formally notified the Boston Building Commissioner that the panels were defective. In October 1973, I.M. Pei and Partners announced that all 10,344 panels would be replaced with single-pane, heat-treated, tempered glass, a fundamentally different system. The replacement cost fell between $5 and $7 million. Reglazing was completed by May 1975. The glass was the story everyone could see. What was happening in the engineering files at the same time was the story nobody talked about publicly. As the reglazing work proceeded, Cobb reached out to Bruno Thurlemann, a Swiss structural engineer described at the time as the world's leading authority on high-rise steel frame buildings. As Robert Campbell of the Boston Globe reported in 1995, Cobb's message to Thurlemann was direct. "We are in trouble. Can you come over?" Thurlemann came. He ran the calculations. He came back with a finding that was not disclosed to the public for years, under certain rare but statistically possible wind conditions. Not a theoretical storm, but a type of extreme wind event that could occur within any given century. The Hancock Tower could fall over, not on its broad glass faces, which the structural system could handle. On its narrow edges, the rhomboid profile that Cobb had used to minimize the building's apparent bulk. The design choice that made it look like a thin plane of glass from certain angles had a structural consequence that the original models had not fully captured. Like a book standing on its spine, the building was more vulnerable from the edges than from the face. To prevent this, 1,500 tons of diagonal steel bracing were added to the building's core at a cost of approximately $5 million. Le Mesurier Consultants designed and installed a dual-tuned mass damper system on the 58th floor. Two 300-ton weights, each a box of steel filled with lead, 17 feet square and 3 feet high, sat on lubricated plates at opposite ends of the floor, connected to the building's frame by springs and shock absorbers. When the building swayed, the weights tended to stay still, allowing the floor to slide beneath them. The springs then engaged, pulling the building back. The system cost approximately $3 million. It addressed the sway that upper floor occupants were experiencing as motion sickness, and managed the building's response to wind events that the original structure could not fully absorb. These interventions were not presented as crisis management. They were absorbed into the ongoing construction narrative. The structural instability finding remained largely outside public knowledge. On September 15, 1975, John Hancock Mutual Life Insurance Company filed suit against I.M. Pei and Partners, Libby Owens Ford, curtain wall subcontractor H.H. Robertson, and 4 additional firms. A 6-year legal battle began. Trinity Church, meanwhile, was already in court. The excavation retaining walls had warped in 1968, giving way to the clay and mud fill beneath Back Bay that they were supposed to hold back. The shifting soil had damaged utility lines, sidewalk pavement, and the church's own foundation. Trinity's south side, closest to the tower site, had settled unevenly, migrating toward the Hancock excavation. A spray of cracks had run up through the church's stone masonry. Trinity Church eventually won a jury verdict of $4.1 million, with interest growing to approximately $11 to $11.5 million. The tower had damaged the church it was designed to honor. On September 29, 1976, the John Hancock Tower was formally dedicated, 4 to 5 years behind its original schedule, and at a cost that had grown from $75 million to between $160 million and $175 million. It was the tallest building in New England, ringed by active lawsuits, with the structural findings sealed from public view. In August 1981, the 6-year lawsuit settled out of court. The terms were not disclosed. A gag order was imposed, sealing the confirmed technical cause of the glass failure from public record. Engineers and architects knew what Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager had found. The glass manufacturer knew. The public did not. Myths and competing theories circulated freely, filling the gap that the legal settlement had created. The legal settlement sealed what the physics had exposed. For approximately 17 years, the city of Boston had a nationally known architectural landmark whose most famous engineering failure had no officially admitted public cause. The gag order lapsed around 1990, the thermal stress mechanism. The overstiff bond that could not absorb the building's natural movement was only then publicly confirmed. No finding of fraud or intentional concealment has been publicly established in the record. What the facts do show is a technically ambitious project in which an unprecedented glass system was deployed at unprecedented scale, with a failure mechanism that required laboratory investigation to confirm, and was not considered predictable under standard practice at the time. And then a legal resolution that was structured to keep the confirmed answer out of public reach for nearly 2 decades. The developer commissioned a prestigious firm, received professional engineering, obtained city approvals, and pursued legal action once the failures became apparent. I.M. Pei and Partners settled without admitting liability. The glass manufacturer ultimately paid for the replacement, The building commissioner was formally notified of the defect in June 1973, and the project continued toward completion. Everyone had a position, everyone's position was defensible, and the public record still contains a gap that the gag order placed there. That is what makes the story harder to close than the repairs were. The glass holds today. The replacement panels have performed. The 58th floor weights still operate. The building has held its title as the tallest structure in New England for 50 years. Henry Cobb received the AIA National Honor Award for the tower in 1977, 1 year after the dedication of a building he had reportedly not entered for years. Architects, critics, and Boston residents came to regard it as one of the city's great landmarks. The architectural record described it as a strong, energetic, civil presence. Every account of it still begins with the windows. Approximately 5,000 of the original panels that were removed intact during the reglazing were later sold for $100 each, repurposed as picture frames, coffee tables, and greenhouse parts. The panels that were meant to be the largest color field painting ever made, the mirror of Boston's skyline, the silent argument for modernism in a historic square, ended up in people's living rooms. Sold for $100 apiece. What remains of the original design, in terms of function, lives on the 58th floor, in small utility rooms at each end of the building, behind office floors that operate normally. Two 300-ton lead-filled steel boxes sit on lubricated plates in the dark. They are connected to the building's frame by springs and shock absorbers. When the wind builds against the tower's narrow edges, the building wants to move. The weights stay still. The floor slides beneath them. The springs engage. The building is pulled back. The fix is not a repair. It is a negotiation, permanent, continuous, and invisible to everyone in the building above and below it. The tower was made safe. But it was made safe in a way that requires the safety mechanism to keep running, indefinitely, for as long as the building stands. The original structural condition was not eliminated. It was counterbalanced. The building is still there. The weights are still moving. And somewhere in the space between what was promised and what was built, between what the design intended and what the physics required, between what the legal settlement sealed and what the engineering eventually confirmed, the real story of the John Hancock Tower has been sitting quietly for 50 years.